Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to the podcast episode. The first one since October. We were on a little bit of a hiatus. So it's so fantastic to be back. I'm Tai Wai. I'm a non-binary Aero Aspec PhD candidate and a very part-time content creator. And I've been lucky enough to work as a co-facilitator of a discussion and support group for Ace and Aero folks since 2022. And that has kind of been a big source of inspiration for the podcast. And so we started the podcast last year, and the Aspec podcast focuses around exploring the diversity of experiences within the Ace and Aero communities, and explicitly the importance of considering intersectionality when discussing these experiences. So that's a little about me and a little bit about the podcast. I'd love to turn it over to Katrina and Catherine at this point to say hello and introduce themselves. Does anybody want to go first? Do I pick somebody?
I guess I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Katrina, and I am the writer and director and now the editor of our short film, Aromcom. And outside of that, I've been a science video producer. My background is in science communication and video production. I used to work at NASA Goddard as a video producer and for the Hubble Space Telescope. Currently, I work part-time with NHK, which is Japan's public broadcaster, and then with freelance work when I can find it. So yeah, happy to be here with you all to talk about Aromcom and Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week. So I'll turn it over to Catherine now.
Hi, I'm Catherine Boblik. I am the producer on Aromcom, and when I was not doing the producing for this, I am also a director, writer, and outside of doing that, I have also made my own Ace short film and do a lot of documentary work and working on creating more feature-length Ace and Aero narrative films that we can have for media, because we don't have a lot of them.
It's a real problem. There's such a lack of Ace and Aero representation in media. We've talked a lot about that on the podcast in the past. In any sort of media, whether it's books, but particularly TV and film, there's just such a lack of representation. So it's absolutely fantastic to have this sort of representation, such as on Aromcom. And feel free. What's the other Ace short film that you recently created, Catherine?
It is called Cupcake.
I will link that in the chat if folks want to check that out. So while I am going ahead and getting that link, can you tell us a little bit about Aromcom and the film? What's it about? What's the focus? And just generally tell us about Aromcom.
Yeah, so Aromcom, it's a short film, about a 15-minute film. We'll see about how long it is when I'm finished editing it, but around there. And a narrative film. And we just shot it a few weeks ago in January. So the log line, I also have to pull up the log line. The log line is, while stranded in a small Icelandic town during a winter storm, a nosy woman develops a squish, a platonic crush, on the badass, aloof owner of a found GoPro who starts to open up once they discover that they're both on the asexual and aromantic spectrums. So the film takes place in Iceland, but we filmed it here in the DC area in Maryland. And I had a fantastic team with me, including my partner on all this, Catherine, as my producer. Is there anything general you want to say about the film, Catherine?
It was, as a producer, it was a really fun challenge, and sometimes not a fun challenge, to try to figure out how to create Iceland in the DMV area. There's a lot of things that, we weighed, like actually going to Iceland for like a hot second, but we really love the crew we had assembled here, and we wouldn't have been able to like financially take them all with us. So we had to figure out things, and we had like a micro crisis about snow and making snow for a little bit. But we were smiled down upon by the weather and got real snow. So things like that. I think that's some of the challenges on that part.
Oh, absolutely. We have been absolutely hammered with snow here. I'm up in Ontario, not too far from Toronto, and we've had an obscene amount of snow in the last several weeks. I've been sharing photos on my social media. I recently read that since January, we've had 1.1 meters or almost 4 feet of snow, and most of that has stuck
Wow.
around. And
Wow.
I think the vast majority fell within a 5-day period from like Thursday the 12th to Sunday the 17th, when we had about 2.5 or 3 feet of snowfall.
Wow.
We
It
got
has
about
been-
like maybe 6 or 7 inches in early January, like January 6th, I think. And I was like, maybe this will just stay through when we need to do the shoot in a few weeks. And luckily, some of it did, because it was just so cold the next few weeks that some of it managed to stick around. So we were able to have at least some snow on the ground.
It was like the day before set, and we're like, the snow's still here. And then we get to set, and it started melting. So we had our lovely production assistants, and we brought them shovels, and they're like out moving the snow to get the snow into the frame with that.
Yes. That was thank you to our production assistants who
You know,
definitely were shoveling snow from one side of the field and putting it to the other side of the field where we needed it to be in the shots.
That reminds me of the 2010 Winter Olympic Games when it was held in Vancouver, and it was an El Nino year, and so it was just absolutely pouring down rain on all the mountains. And so we had no snow for the Olympic Games. And so they were having to like truck snow in from several hundred kilometers away, helicopter it in to just put enough down for the events to take place. So that kind of gave me shades of the 2010 Olympic Winter Games.
Yeah. Would have been fun if we tried to helicopter snow in. Our backup plan was to try to go to local ice rinks and get ice shavings from the rinks and like truck it in. So that was, yeah. Luckily we didn't have to do our backup plan.
I am so
'Cause they
glad
were
you
all, like,
didn't either.
gross plan.
Yes, those ice shavings are really gross. So I'm glad you didn't have to do that either.
Yep.
So what about the title of the film? You know, I absolutely love the title. You know, it really hints, obviously, you know, arom, you know, aromantic, really hints at the Aspec themes explored in the movie, but I think it's also a great way of telling us what it isn't, and that is a romantic comedy. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, can you speak to how you came up with the title of the film?
Yeah, I didn't have a title for it for a while. I don't know if Catherine remembers our first few production meetings. I was like, and one of our to-do items, figure out the title. I had a list of ideas, but I didn't like any of them. Do you remember what some of them were, Catherine? I think I had like Iceland, like a cross between asexual and Iceland, and yeah, others that were even worse than that. I don't remember exactly what they were, but
Something with Aurora and trying to make like Ace Aurora or something like that. It was
yeah.
not pretty.
But when I went out to a cousin's wedding in Southern California, and while I was there, I met up with a friend who I'd worked with on a previous show, who now works at JPL. And so I was talking with her about how I was struggling to figure out a title, and she's like, "What about a rom-com?" I'm like, "Well, maybe." And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, it's simple, but I think that actually really works. And I liked it because it leaned more into the our characters are both on the asexual and aromantic sides, but I like that it leaned into the aromantic side a little bit more, and also obviously the pun with the agro and rom-com and a rom-com. Yeah, it just kind of fit and it worked, and so that's what we went with.
I absolutely love the title. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So great job in, you know, coming up with that with that title. And, as somebody who's aromantic myself, I absolutely, love the fact that there's some great aromantic representation both in the title and the film. So
yeah, so shout out to my friend Lisa. Thank you. Otherwise, we'd still probably be stuck with Iceland, which is not nearly as good.
It was Iceland film for quite a long time.
Yeah, like the names in the Google Drive of the folders was just Iceland film.
Self-titled said their thesis film in college also had a punny title, so they also really appreciate the title. All right, so I've mentioned the fact that I'm an Arctic researcher. When I'm not doing content creation, when I'm not hosting this podcast, my research focuses a lot on Arctic snow cover and Arctic permafrost and what's happening to it in climate. So I've always wanted to visit Iceland and just the Arctic in general. So, I wanted to, find out a little bit, what was the decision for choosing, Iceland as kind of the main focus of the film, or the location, I guess, where it takes place.
Yeah, so I wrote this based on real events. So I've been to Iceland, and so when I originally wrote this film, it was back in 2021, I think, and it was just I was part of I joined a group of hobby filmmakers, and they were doing some little kind of informal workshops together to practice for the 48-hour film festival. And so there was a script writing workshop, and so where they would name a couple of genres and give you a prop and possibly something else that I'm forgetting. So they'd given me the genres of rom-com and travel and possibly also detective story. And so I was just trying to think, like, what from my own life could I kind of mesh into sort of all three of those genres. And so I was thinking about my trip to Iceland back in 2018, where I'd lost my GoPro on a glacier and then got stuck in the blizzard, and the Icelandic Red Cross in Vic had put us all up in the gym there because the roads were closed. And so I put pretty much those exact plot points into the story, but then made it a platonic meet cute between two characters on the aromantic and asexual spectrums. So I made it a rom-com, but between queer characters and a platonic rom-com, essentially. Yeah, so that's why it was Iceland originally, was because it was based off of my real events in Iceland, and it seemed like a good setting for a story. And then I kind of over the years kept thinking about well, what if I actually made this film? Because I kind of really liked that little script I'd written just as a writing exercise. Yeah, so it was like yeah, so it was in 2023 then that I finally started looking around for producers and a director of photography to see if there was anyone interested in actually making this film. And so as I was talking with Maddie, who's our director of photography, kind of more about the visuals of it, like she really liked how there was the nice contrast between kind of the starkness and the beauty of Iceland and then kind of the warmth of the story. So yeah, there's a lot of contrast in general and like visually in Iceland. That starkness versus beauty, the cold versus warmth, is a great plot device. And then also as I was doing, like after I cast the characters, and so now like, okay, now I know that two of the characters are Black, and so like trying to do more research kind of about so what would these characters maybe have experienced in Iceland that I didn't as a white woman. Like, is there anything I should be aware of? Like, is it a place that's like for the two side characters who are a gay couple, is there anything difficult about traveling to Iceland as like an openly gay couple? Is it difficult particularly in terms of racial things. And really, no. Like, I checked the Wikipedia page yesterday for LGBTQ rights in Iceland, and Iceland's currently listed as the #1 most LGBT friendly country in the world. And it's also, at least according to people on the internet, they generally feel safe, people of other races traveling there. So it kind of also sort of eliminates a lot of the social and political issues that we have here in the US. So it's just kind of a great location for the film on all fronts. Like, it works plot wise, it works visual wise, it kind of works in terms of being able to focus on sort of one social issue and not really having to deal with all the other ones on top of it.
Absolutely. And then of course in the logo for Aromcom as well, I like the fact that you purposely chose the Northern Lights to have both green and purple. So I think that, that's a really, really smart choice. We're able to sneak the
And
Northern
of course,
Lights.
shout out to Catherine for designing that.
It's a great logo. I absolutely love it. For folks that aren't aware, the logo is featured here on the layout. You can see it up near the episode 14, near the top of the layout. While I have not been to Iceland, I have been to the Arctic, though only in the summertime. And I can tell you that traveling in the Arctic, as you explained, can be very difficult because trying to get out of anywhere is a complete crapshoot. You don't know if your flight's going to leave on the day of, because particularly in the summertime, you get constant advection fog coming off the ocean. And so your flight 9 times out of 10 will be delayed for at least a couple days by fog. So I can certainly sympathize with the travel issues of being, in Iceland during winter. So that's certainly something I can sympathize with.
Yeah. Catherine, what were your thoughts when I first approached you with a film that takes place in Iceland?
It was like, oh no. It was like, absolutely, I want to work on this, because I had met you on a Women in Film in DC project, and I thought you were just so highly functional and confident and very cool. And I was like, I love.
Oh, thank you.
Sometimes it doesn't happen on film sets. You can see lots of chaos, but it was like, oh my goodness, this is like absolutely something I care about. And then I was like, oh, we're doing it here. Oh no. So lots of my creative brain kicked on. I was like, how can we generate Iceland in this area? And we spent more time, we spent a long time looking for actors, but we spent more time looking for locations than we did actors, because we really wanted to set, especially for Katrina's vision of this, what the feel of Iceland was. They have their really nice, clean, sort of Scandi aesthetic places, but then the place that Katrina's inspiration came from was just not a cool gym. It was just it was old. It didn't look like it had been in renovation in many years. So trying to find things that sort of evoked the fun vacation energy of this portion, and then the sort of beaten down, this is not going the way I expected part of the story as well.
Yeah. And another aspect, of course, of choosing Iceland for the story was, as I was writing it, I had in mind some of the visuals that I already had from my actual trip to Iceland. I already have video of when I was driving, and there's the whiteout conditions that could potentially be used and incorporated in. We're going to end up trying to green screen that into the front of a windshield from a car scene that we shot. And I already have some of the GoPro footage that can then be in the film. It's Parker's GoPro footage of them snorkeling through that the crack between the plate boundaries, North American and Eurasian plates, and the dog sledding one was in Sweden, not Iceland, but so I had various footage that I figured could be used in this film, which so that was another reason why I had picked Iceland.
Very smart on the ability to make use of that footage to add to the fact. I know it must have been a complete challenge trying to recreate Iceland in the DC area for sure. And so having that footage makes complete sense to be able to make use of.
Right.
Yeah, no, and it's good because it also gives us sort of a link to. I think it's fun because it gives a personal link to like Katrina's story, and in that, like you feel like you have this footage that makes it a little more real and help connect.
Absolutely.
Know it's a real story.
Absolutely. That's a really good point as well. You know, it really adds a personal touch to it for sure.
Yeah, I'm basically kind of just translating my own story into now this fictionalized version of it with different people and just slightly different events, but it's just kind of transforming this kind of a stressful event that I went through into something that's sort of exciting and cool that we get to share with the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Point of filmmaking, right?
Definitely. You know, I wish I had more of a knowledge about filmmaking. So I have absolute great respect for, you know, the filmmaking process. I personally don't have much experience with it. So it's really interesting to get, you know, an inside perspective on, you know, how does, you know, the filmmaking process work. My whole entire school has been devoted to, you know, much more on the scientific side of things, climate change, physical geography, the Arctic. So, you know, getting to learn a little bit about, you know, the filmmaking process is really neat for sure. So we alluded to this earlier. But, you know, isolation is one of the main themes in the film. And isolation is unfortunately also a really common experience for, you know, ace and aro folks. And, you know, that's particularly because of the fact that asexuality and aromanticism can be seen as, quote, the invisible orientations. There's not necessarily this highly visible aspect to being ace or aro. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, don't really understand what asexuality and aromanticism are for the most part. So, you know, there's isolation that really comes from so many different aspects of, you know, being under those umbrellas. Can you speak to how the film explores this concept of isolation and kind of ties it in with the ace and aro experience?
You want to try starting that off, Catherine? Just because I've been speaking
No,
more.
so what was the fun challenge with this in like creating shot design? So going into film, I will, since we are not all like immersed in film 24/7 here, is that we usually start from a script and then we work back from there of like visually what do we want to do? What does this not only going to look like, but what is this going to say about the character and how do we execute it? And it's very different from like going to see a play because there's blocking and people can move around and you have a little bit of choice of like where you can direct people's eye. But in film, you have all the control over that. So everything you're doing needs to be saying something with that. And we have this very beautiful set of shots in this film where Parker, our main character, is in this cafe watching all of these romantic couples. And in a normal like rom-com, that would be like, ooh, like they're feeling alone because of they want to be in a romantic relationship. And this one, we had to think of like a cinematic language and a way to express that without giving it sort of that like, it was a different sort of isolation. It wasn't sort of the longing after it was sort of the cold, I don't quite understand what's going on here and I feel left out because of it. And so that was really fun to develop this specific moment. We went in with that idea of making it feel uncomfortable to the audience. So people who maybe are not allo amato people who don't quite understand what we're trying to say with this, but people who can connect with that experience will feel it as well, would feel this closeness, but also this kind of unsettling concern with that. So we have like really uncomfortable close-ups of people like holding hands and kissing, and we are trying to create this lens of like feeling like this is uncomfortable to the audience and people watching that. And that's, I think, a lot of what Aspec people go through is like, this is very uncomfortable and everyone's doing it, so I feel very alone.
Absolutely. I am so glad you brought it up, because I think one of the challenges that has been, for many folks is, how do you easily portray the experience of asexuality and or aromanticism on screen without specifically naming, oh, this character is ace or this character is aro, because it's about the absence of that attraction or feeling, and that's more difficult to do than speaking in the amatonormative language, show a depiction of love between two different characters. Here we're actually talking about the absence of it, so I think that's really important to kind of mention, and I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that was sorry, Katrina. No.
Go ahead and finish your thought, because I was about to kind of go in a different direction.
No, I was just saying that was like a really fun challenge of this film, was figuring out how to like code break a visual language that we haven't really experienced so far, without what a lot of television does, where they kind of read you the dictionary definition of what these orientations are, and then they move on.
Yes, it's very frustrating to see, ace and or aro depictions in mainstream media typically just being, oh, this person is ace because of X, Y, and Z, and then they're like this sort of side character that doesn't get any sort of deep exploration into their character, or the only thing about them is that they're ace. They're very one-dimensional. So having that sort of, time to explore the character in a more complex way is really what we need, and I'm so glad you brought that up.
And what I was going to bring up was that we have two characters who are both on the asexual and the aromantic spectrums, and I think by having two of any demographic kind of allows you to explore a little more fully and look at different types of experiences. So with our two different Aspec characters, one of them connects with people more easily than the other one does. And so they both probably experience some feelings of isolation, but definitely to different degrees and in different ways. And so Merida, she's really a people person. She's always had great friends. She has her friends with her here, Trey and Brandon. And they don't fully get her Aspec identity though. So that's kind of where she might experience a little bit of isolation there, because that's sort of representing that experience of even within the queer community. A lot of people in the queer community are not like fully understanding or aware of the aromantic and asexual spectrums. So she has a lot of friends, but not really ones that fully understand her experience. Parker, on the other hand, has a lot of difficulty connecting with any sort of people. Being Aspec hasn't really made that any easier, but that's not really the full reason why Parker has a lot of trouble connecting with people. Parker just has a lot of sensory overwhelm and is kind of socially awkward, and Parker's neurodivergent, doesn't really realize that yet. So we have a couple of different experiences here of two people who have similar sexual romantic identities, but very different experiences in life.
Self-titled mentioned as somebody who's autistic. They love Parker already, and I myself am neurodivergent. I've been diagnosed with both autism and ADHD, so I can very much sympathize with Parker's plight in that regard for sure. And I think that in my case, the neurodivergence, the asexuality, and aromanticism are correlated in my case. I think the neurodivergence is inextricably linked with my sexual and romantic orientations from my own experience at least. So that's
Right.
it's very interesting to see that kind of fleshed out in a film for sure.
Yeah.
Self-titled said collecting as many A's as we can.
Right.
So one of the things that folks in the ace and or arrow community will often mention is the AAA battery, which is somebody who's asexual, aromantic, and agender. But then a lot of us are also autistic and also and or ADHD. So, sometimes we're up to 4 or 5 different A's.
Yeah, I keep vaguely having in mind the idea to write a sequel at some point, and I don't have a plot for the sequel yet, but that's like one line that I have in mind for the sequels is the AAA battery, and then Parker going, maybe I'm like a quadruple A battery, like just so many A's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've definitely joked before that I'm a quadruple A battery. I sadly can't say I'm quintuple because I don't identify as agender, though I'm close because I identify somewhere in the non-binary umbrella. So I'm very close, but I can't quite claim the quintuple A battery. So it's extremely exciting, to see a movie that explores, the importance of platonic relationships. With Valentine's Day having just happened, it's very much a reminder of how much society prioritizes romantic relationships, and unfortunately, as a side effect, deprioritizes platonic friendships. There's always this the default assumption in life is you're going to have friends when you're younger, and there's that relationship escalator. Oh, you're going to find somebody, you're going to become their friend, and over time you should, become more than friends. But they don't recognize the fact that it's perfectly okay to have platonic friendships and not want to be in a romantic relationship. Elizabeth Brake, in her 2012 book, Minimizing Marriage, coined the term amatonormativity as the assumption that everybody desires to be in a coupled and monogamous romantic relationship. And so this is really problematic for both folks in the Aspec community, but also, poly folks as well, because not everybody wants to be in a monogamous relationship. Not everybody wants to be in a romantic relationship at all. And there's so many other kinds of relationships that society kind of ignores or deprioritizes, because everything, romantic is held up here on a pedestal. So, it's really great to see a film dedicated to, a platonic meet cute, to celebrating the platonic relationships we have in our lives. Can you kind of speak to the importance of platonic relationships and how you kind of explored this in the film a bit?
Well, one of the goals of the film is to show platonic relationships in a way that's just as exciting and fulfilling as romantic relationships, particularly in terms of a new relationship. So just kind of the parallels between a rom-com where they're really excited about a new romantic relationship, and then this one, the Merida is just as excited for a new friendship, where she's kind of got this squish on this person that she hasn't met yet, and trying to connect with them, and there's sort of a bit of tension and misunderstandings at first, but of course eventually they make that connection. Of course, it's a happy ending because we're paralleling a rom-com, so you kind of know that's where it's going. But yeah, so in terms of and yeah, I think that's probably something that a lot of people want to see. I know when we were putting together our crowdfunding campaign and our pitch videos, at the time back in October 2023, that study had come out about that they had surveyed youth in the United States and found that like almost half of them, maybe it was more than half, it was a large percent that wanted to see more platonic content featured in television and film, and like 39% or whatever the specific number was specifically wanted to see more asexual and aromantic characters. So there's definitely people who want to see more of this, and so it was nice having those stats available right as we were trying to crowdfund for this film.
Yeah. I think something that this film does a good job of sort of showcasing that is like the amatonormative fallacy is that you put like all your eggs in the basket of this one person. Like you have one person in this world. And I don't think people are built for that. Like we're built for all different kinds of relationships and different people that help do different social things in our lives. And we kind of explore that in this film a little bit in the way of like Merida is somebody who has like very outgoing, has friends, and these friends are in a relationship with each other, but they are not sort of the friends that are clicking with her for understanding like their worldview. And so that's what I love about these two becoming friends in this film, is that they have that shared connection of a shared experience. Not every friend or people in your life have to have that, but there's something special about having people that are able to share your lived experiences or understand where you're coming from. And I think that's an important thing that we get to showcase here is like you can have lots of relationships and friends in your life, but there's different ways that different people serve different roles.
Right.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, one of the things that we've talked about both here on the podcast and that I talk about quite frequently in the Ace and Arrow discussion / support group that I help run is this idea of basically relationship anarchy. Have you heard that term before?
Yes.
The idea that you don't, prioritize any one relationship over any other relationship, and you value your relationships, for their own uniqueness. And this is something I think that many folks in the Ace and Arrow communities in particular can really appreciate because, the relationships that we have in the Aspec communities don't follow that heteronormative and or amatonormative mold in many cases. And so having something like relationship anarchy as a toolkit can be really helpful. But I think that one of the things that I like to bring up is that relationship anarchy, I think, can be helpful to anybody in any sort of relationship, irregardless of if they're in a coupled monogamous heteronormative romantic relationship or a queer platonic relationship. I think that these ideas and this challenging of the social norms around relationships can be really useful and really helpful in understanding that, hey, it's okay to have somebody beyond my one and only soulmate for the rest of my life that has to theoretically bring me everything. And we know that that's not possible. No one person can meet all your needs simultaneously. So I think bringing that up is, I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's such an important concept. And it's something I really like to talk about here and in the discussion group. So just looking at the time here, I think we have a few more minutes and then we're going to get our next ad break. So I'm just going to check to see when the next one will be taking place because I want to try to tie in a a little stretch break for us before
Okay.
we continue.
Yeah. But while you're looking at uh, we did an interview a few months back with do they pronounce it ARIA? I'm not sure. The aromantic. It's a very long acronym, but the aromantic awareness education group. And I had mentioned in that interview that similar to what you were saying, I think learning about the aromantic and asexual spectrums is helpful for everybody, just because you start to become more aware of all the different types of attraction, different types of relationships, and different, yeah, just many different ways that you can be relating to somebody. And so that kind of, falls into relationship anarchy too. Like I know there's different diagrams where you can kind of map out how you want your relationship to look, and you got all the different bubbles. It would be nice if there was like a worksheet version of that was a little easier to fill out, but
There is. It's called the Relationship Anarchy Smorgasbord.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. But I've tried filling it out, and it's just like there's not like a PDF fillable version of it. It's just like very small bubbles all over the place.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, basically anyone in any type of relationship can be kind of rethinking it, and just and being a little bit more deliberate about how they want their relationships to look like. So yes, I definitely think a lot of these concepts are applicable across a variety of different identities, and really anyone can make use of them.
Absolutely. So I think it looks like the next break will be in about 15 minutes, so we probably have time for we can take a break at any time though, theoretically. How are you feeling? Do you want to tackle one more question before the break? Do you want to take a break now? How do you want to do it?
I'm good either way. How about you, Catherine?
I'm good to chat a little longer. I'm good. I'm flexible.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So it is not a coincidence that Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week, or Arospec Awareness Week, happens to fall immediately after Valentine's Day. This is by design. So while the first Arrow Week took place in November in 2014, in 2015, it was moved to the first full week after Valentine's Day as kind of a very visible reminder that, hey, look, holidays like Valentine's Day are really problematic for a, not insignificant proportion of the population. And so it's been amazing to see, more and more folks coming up with ways to make things like Valentine's more inclusive, both to Aspec folks, but also to folks that may not currently be in a relationship. So I've participated in several Palentines Day events over the past few years, which celebrate the platonic relationships that we have in our lives. And in fact, I just participated in a Palentines themed raid train where we talked about many of these same issues like amatonormativity, relationship anarchy, and a lot of the same things that we're talking about today on the podcast we explored in this Palentines themed raid train. So I wanted to ask both of you, have you participated in a Palentines event before?
Catherine, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I have not. I have done Galentine's Days event. When was the first time you participated in a Palentine's one? Because I want to know how new it is and how far behind I am.
So I think the first time I came across that term was probably 2017. And I think it was at one of the local libraries here. They hosted a Palentine's event. They didn't explicitly mention, Aspec folks. They marketed it more broadly. But basically, the way they marketed it was, for the folks that happen to be single, there's this great event that you can come to. that isn't all about romance. And so that's how they marketed it initially. But I think 2017 was the first time I came across it.
I've done Galentine's events, and my theory is that this sort of evolved from the Parks and Rec reference. I'm rewatching
That
that
could
one,
be, yeah.
and I saw it that episode came out 2010. I started hearing about Galentine's 2013, 2014. So I'm wondering if like that evolved for it, and kind of circling back, like the power of media. We had a silly joke in a TV show that became like a real cultural thing that helped like expand the idea of what we view Valentine's as.
Would not be surprised. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's the origin. It might
That's
be.
my theory. I don't know if it's real.
Yeah, I've done Valentine's Day. I think it was back in 2019. I know there was a Galentine's Day event at work back in like 2014. So yes, I've been invited to people's Valentine's and Galentine's Day events before. It's been a while though.
Self-titled mentioned that at their college they hosted a speed dating for friends that was focused around platonic relationships and platonic friendships. And I've been lucky enough to, while I haven't had a chance to participate in any of them, the local Ace and Arrow groups here in Toronto have all done versions of speed dating for friends or speed friending events. So those are becoming more and more common now as well.
I've been watching the new season of Love is Blind, and a thought that crossed my mind was, what if they did like a platonic version of this, and they were just kind of trying to test out how do they make friends better with the people in the pods, or then with the people, because there's like two groups of people traditionally is segregated by gender, but what if you just had like, it wasn't gender based, but you just had two different groups of people, and like, do they make friends better with the groups of people who are talking about their pod dates, or do they make friends better through the pods? So I don't know. That was just a thought that crossed my mind recently. What if there's a reality show about trying to make friends?
Heck yes, I would definitely be down for that. I would love to see something like that for sure. And also the fact... Sorry?
Trademarking.
Yeah, there you go. That's your sequel to this.
We'll have to ask our associate producer, Sam, about that, because she actually worked on one of the seasons of Love is Blind.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, like the fact that you brought up it doesn't have to be gender-based. Because that's something
Right.
that I definitely like to remind people. Why does everything have to be the gender binary when it doesn't?
Yeah. Even with all the reality dating shows, there's so few queer versions of them, which is weird to me.
I was actually reading some data about even though there's a broad love for reality TV shows and dating, most of it is pandering towards people who watch it on TV traditionally. And those numbers come from the Midwest, which is higher sort of red state energy, which is why things like that don't
Even for
happen.
Netflix, though? I don't know.
Even for Netflix, yeah.
Interesting. Huh.
They're
Okay.
going off the model of advertising, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of makes sense, unfortunately.
I feel like there's such a big market for them, but yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's not as big of a market as I think it is.
So kind of building on this, how can we continue to work to fight against the amatonormative assumptions that Valentine's Day brings and work to make not only Valentine's Day, but kind of days like it more inclusive to the Aspec community and just more inclusive to anybody that doesn't fit the heteronormative coupled monogamous mold?
I think for, more inclusive Valentine's Day is treating it like you're still in elementary school. I don't know if this is as a Canadian tradition, but in the States, we have like, you bring Valentines for your whole class and your friends. It's not like a romantic thing. It's just like a fun appreciation and y'all get candy. And I think like when I was a child, it was like making like gifts from my parents, and like they had ones for that. And I think it's a very sort of corporate commercial thing for
Mhm.
it to be, like a Amato sort of holiday. And I think that just treating it more like that, like the love for your friends and the love for your family, and still executing it in that sort of youthful spirit way, and not thinking about how everyone wants you to buy something to express romance.
Absolutely, yes. As a elementary school kid, I do remember having, you know, us bring, little Valentine's cards for everybody in the classroom. Absolutely. There still was a little bit of a reminder of the kind of, where it kind of was coming from. It was still called Valentines. So I think still had a connection to some degree to the corporatization of Valentine's Day. But yes, you're right in that it doesn't specifically single out romantic love as only being the only valid and true love for sure.
Yeah, I honestly I haven't had a whole lot of interaction with Valentine's Day since grade school, really. Like, there's only been one Valentine's Day where I had a romantic partner, so it's usually just another day to me. So it's not really something I think too much about most of the time. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's just a way to corporatize friendships too. Figure out a way for people to make money off of it, and then that'll enter the culture.
Oh,
Loosen up,
absolutely.
capitalism.
Corporations always find ways to monetize anything and everything. So I
Right.
wouldn't be surprised that eventually it becomes corporatizing friendships rather than romantic interests. Ghost Hugs Incoming mentioned that uh, their friends gave them a Valentine's like kids do at school a few years ago, and it was very sweet. Absolutely, I had a couple folks hand out kind of platonic Valentines or Palentines cards to me recently. And I think last year I participated in a Palentines event with one of the Ace and Arrow groups in Toronto. And I brought Palentines cards with relationship anarchy uh, kind of tinged themes on them, which I was particularly proud of.
Yeah. Well, maybe going back to what Catherine said, just having another popular TV show or movie having a Valentine's Day event, and that could become an even bigger thing than it is now. So just
Absolutely.
putting it into popular media representation somewhere could help move that along.
For sure, I absolutely agree. So we are coming up to the ad break here in about 40 seconds. So it has been about an hour at this point. Would you like to take a quick stretch break and come back in, 4 or 5 minutes maybe?
Yeah,
Sure,
sounds
you can
good.
do that.
Sounds good. Yeah. So we're just gonna switch over to the Be Right Back screen, and we'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes. So see folks soon. All right, welcome back, folks. Welcome back from the ads. Thank you for sticking through the 3 minutes of ads. I know they're frustrating, but it's also really helpful because it reminds me that I need to step away from the screen every so often. So it's somewhat strategic that I set the ads the way that I do, since it's a good reminder that, hey, it's been an hour, you should probably take a stretch break. So I shared a link to the film Freeway earlier for Cupcake, but Catherine sent me a link to the actual film that you can actually access and watch if you'd like, that I've just placed in the chat. And do you want to, since I brought it up, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about Cupcake?
Yeah, so Cupcake is a film I made for the Sundance Ignite competition, and it is about a um, couple who are long distance and they get back together, and the one partner brings up the uncomfortable the uncomfortable topic of why they're not in a sexual relationship, and then the other character starts going like, that's not my experience, and the allo partner doesn't really get it, and so it kind of ends up into a goofy sort of spiral of he's trying to explain attraction to them, and there's a dancing cupcake.
Absolutely, this notion of attraction or the lack thereof can certainly be difficult to figure out on both ends of the spectrum, for allo folks to understand the asexual experience. And, I think for many ace folks, coming to understand what is sexual attraction and what is it that they're lacking can be a real challenge. And, I think that's partly why many folks that are ace spec don't actually come to realize it until later in life. I didn't come out as ace until I was 30. And it's because I think I identify somewhere in the gray ace region, but it's hard to figure out what is attraction. And, what you thought may have been sexual attraction was actually aesthetic or another type of attraction. So it's certainly something that can take a long time to figure out. And there's a lot of misunderstandings all across the board for sure.
Yeah.
Same, did not figure that out. It was, and going back to media, like my first exposure to like asexuality was BoJack Horseman.
Great.
So
yeah.
it was kind of like, oh, that couldn't. And then it took several years, and I don't know if I've told Katrina this one. It was working through this short film that I first was like, I was in post, I was like, oh my god, this is me. I identify with a lot of this stuff here. I was like, I think this will be a good film. I understand. I get this community's vibe. And then I was like, oh no, I am a part of this community. That's why I was so involved. Yeah.
Interesting. I think my first exposure was probably like that house episode back in the late aughts, which was not a great portrayal of it. But I think but then there's like years later there was Ash Hardell's series, the ABCs of LGBTQ, and they did this series about the asexual and the romantic spectrums, and so that was a lot more clarifying at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did briefly talk about the very unfortunate house episode and how terrible and problematic it is. So
right.
The folks here are quite aware of the house episode to which we're referring to. But yeah, I think, the BoJack Horseman and the arc that, just allowed the amount of, kind of exploration that they allowed Todd to explore his own asexuality for a mainstream show, I think is, especially at that time, is probably one of the better representations that I can think of.
I think what was so like interesting and about it is that it had some live stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Heartstopper. It's a great show. But the thing going on with that is kind of surface level, and you get to see Todd and BoJack Horseman like go through and live and try a lot of things. So you see a lot more things come up that like I think was part of what was going on for me. It was like, oh yeah, that. There was more of like seeing that experience play out over episodes opposed to one kind of versus Heartstopper where it's one kind of idea stretched out for a long time and just seeing little chunks of it at a time.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that Todd actually, there's this whole arc where Todd develops an ace dating app and the challenges that he encounters in trying to create an ace specific dating app was a really interesting arc as well. Because I know that many ace folks really hate the dating apps that are out there, including Bumble, just because they're so problematic for so many reasons. So that was a very interesting kind of arc that they took with BoJack Horseman. So we've talked a lot about, Palentine's Day. We've talked about amatonormativity and the importance of, platonic relationships and, exploring this in the film. How did filming go? So we just wrapped up. You just wrapped up filming in January, and you mentioned some of the challenges that there were with, making sure that you had enough snow on set. Can you let us in on how the actual filming of it went?
Of course, it was a long process before we even got to filming. Like, I mentioned earlier that when I first talked with Catherine, that was back in 2023. So it was a long fundraising process. Our first crowdfunding campaign attempt wasn't successful, and so then spent another several months after that applying to grants and applying to different screenwriting competitions and trying to figure out alternative funding sources, and got a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, and writing all sorts of letters to foundations and trying to go to Pride events and try to make connections with potential corporate sponsors. And so it was a long process to finally get the film funded. We ended up having after all that work, having a successful crowdfunding campaign last October. And so it was only then finally after October that we could really dive into the pre-production. We had already done the casting and we had already done like some of the pre-production, but there's still a lot of work left. And it kind of kept blowing my mind how much work it was for just a 15-minute film. Like I just, for months, just constantly had stuff to do. And so then we finally got to filming, and then it was, a 3-day filming process. So the culmination of like a year and a half of prep work to do a 3-day shoot. I was telling you before we started talking live that this is actually the first time I've seen Catherine since the shoot. So we're going to figure out, I think right here, like how that shoot went, because we didn't even get a chance to talk a whole lot with each other on the shoot.
Yeah.
Because we're both busy doing our different roles. So Catherine, how do you think the shoot went?
I think it went really well. And I know that this was Katrina's first experience like on a film set, because Katrina has like a long list of like theater directing work. And so there was some things that I think Katrina was a little stressed out about, but it went really well for the most part, at least on my end. I have not seen the footage yet, which I'm excited to do soon. But yeah, no, it was, and our director of photography, this was also their first sort of narrative film as well in that role. They used to be a producer and like are transitioning into this career path. And so I think they were the most stressed out people on set, and then everyone else was having fun. Was kind of what I interpreted from that. There was our actors who were doing Brandon and Trey's characters. They had this sort of goofy scene where they are trying to make Merida and Parker, they don't understand what like sort of friendship bond is forming, and they're trying to like inspire them to be romantic. And so they do this like really goofy sort of fake makeout session in front of them, and the rest of the crew is like dying in the background. Like I'm holding hands with the costume wardrobe person because we do not want to ruin this take. It's amazing, but we are both like going to start crying laughing. And they did this for like 9 takes, and we almost died every single take. And Katrina and Maddie are up there like stone faced. Like they don't
I had no idea this was happening.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, we are like trying not to lose it back here. We are having a goofy time, and then you two are like, they are in such work mode up there. They don't even think
I was concentrating hard.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think set went really well. You always fall a little behind on a film set, but that's part of what my job is to like budget for all the problems that could potentially waylay us and build in time here and there. And shout out to our first AD, Sean, because they did a great job of keeping us on track and making sure and monitoring things, because that's a big part of set is you are fighting time. You have so many shots to do, and you don't know the factor of how long it's going to take things, and you have an idea of how long it's going to take to set up lights and get actors ready and have people where they need to be to get doing it, and it just never sort of pans out exactly because there's no sort of force and there's no pre-practice like a theater stage play to get it ready. So you have to roll with what you have, and you have to sort of accommodate that in there. So
Absolutely. And as somebody that's never worked in the film industry, I have absolutely no idea what it takes to, actually go through and create a 15-minute film. So the fact that you started planning this, years ago, blows my mind, but I can also at the same time appreciate it. Hey, it's only a 15-minute film, but the amount of work that you have to put in for a 15-minute film is a lot. And I
Yeah.
obviously can't speak to film, but I can also as a parallel talk about the struggles that, hey, I published a 20-page paper in the cryosphere in a scientific journal article, and I think a lot of people outside academia don't understand that, hey, it took me 3 years to go from doing the analysis for it to sending in the draft to my supervisor, correcting it, sending it to the publisher, and then have it spending 2 years in, and I mean, this is a little bit of an anomaly, but it takes a long time to get through the peer review process. And so it took me 3.5 years from the time or more from the time I first started doing the analysis for it until it was actually published in the cryosphere in 2024. So I can certainly empathize with a lot of the things that people just don't realize that goes into making something like a 15-minute video, and just how much work it has to be.
I think that's a very comparable, because like the development and planning, I would assume very similar, is like the doing the research, and that's the fun part. And then ours is we have to get funding. So, and I know that happens with like science research as well, is you have to like metaphorically scrounge every couch cushion and then go to your neighbor and be like, do you have any quarters in your cushions for us? And keep doing that part. So I think that was the longest and I think hardest part. And shout out to Katrina for like really sort of grinding and being out there and doing all those applications and putting all that work in for us to have an amazing campaign, so that twice so that this can exist, because the
Right.
first time we did it and it didn't work out, and that's always such a sort of disheartening point, because I've been on many films who don't, not many, but I've been on a couple of films where you don't get your funding and you're like, well, goodbye idea, we're not ever doing this again because it was too hard and it's a little disheartening. So it's really awesome that we were able to work and dig and get all that funding and have the patience to do that. I think most of a film is like 70% is getting funding and like 25% is actually planning for it, and then the last is like 2% is shooting and the rest is like post. It's a lot of prep and planning to get like something that feels so actioned and alive when you're watching it.
Yeah. And well, it was somewhat disheartening, but it was also, I mean, I got a lot of motivation to keep going just based off of how many people were interested during that initial crowdfunding campaign. Like we had we did one in-person event over at the Busboys and Poets. It's a restaurant slash community space slash bookstore here in DC, and we had like a packed house for that, and we had people doing performances, and then and starting to gather an online following, and just a lot of people who were really excited to do this film. But probably the moments, one of the biggest moments where I realized just how many people were excited for a film like this was when we put out our initial casting call, and we got like, in the first day of the casting call, we got like 50 submissions from actors all across the DC area, a lot of really talented queer actors. And one of the on the submission form, one of the questions was something about,
It's Pikachu!
why are you interested in this film? And there are a lot of people writing answers in there about how they're really excited to participate in something with more queer representation in media, and a lot of and some of them specifically excited about having stories about aromantic and asexual people. And so even though we didn't, it was frustrating because it was hard to translate that into actually getting funds, but it did give me motivation to keep trying to do it, because there were just so many people who seemed really excited about this project, and we had a fantastic cast, and we had already put in a lot of work into we had already started doing a lot of the storyboarding and selecting locations, and we had already done a lot of pre-production at that point. And so I really wanted to keep going and trying to figure out how to get this funded. And so I'm glad we eventually managed to do it. And then doing the and then the film shoot itself, I think part of the reason why people seemed to be having a lot of fun with it was just how many people were involved. We had I think counting it all up, over 50 people working on this film shoot across the 3 days, including all the background actors and all of our crew members, our production assistants, and then our main cast of 4. And so a lot of people were telling me, I've never worked on a film of this scale before. And so they're all just really excited to be part of a project that kind of felt so big compared to what, I mean, it's DC. It's not like we're in Los Angeles and New York or Atlanta or something. So it's not like people are used to being able to be on big film sets, especially for something that's just an independent film where they're really not probably expecting a whole lot out of it, because like I'm just a person. We're not like a whole company and organization that does this regularly. We just kind of pulled this together from scratch. So yeah, it was pretty cool being able to put together something on this scale, and just having like a really professional crew and a lot of people who really knew what they were doing, and people really passionate about making the project as good as they could try to make it.
Absolutely. And I can certainly empathize with the struggle it is to get funding for things. And
Yeah.
especially now that I'm no longer funded as a PhD student and trying to scrape my way through the rest of this degree and the struggle it is.
Who's that Pokemon?
Duke with
It's
a
Pikachu!
gift sub to
It's Clefairy!
self-titled and to Coziest Fox, one of the Fruity Stream Team members. I need to fix that. Thank you for reminding me. The sound alert whenever somebody subs is a meme from basically the early 2000s, where it's like, who's that Pokemon? But the sound is way too loud. And so I think it jump scared quite a few people by mistake. So whoops, I need to fix that for sure. But yeah, absolutely. Trying to film this on such a tight budget as well, and you talk about the struggles and the challenge that it is to film on the tight budget that you were working with.
Yeah. So I think that one of the big things was we live in a region where, like Katrina was mentioning, it's not a mega sort of film video hub, but there are a lot of people here that do it because we do have lots of like government work. We do have lots of government video. We have Nat Geo here, so we have lots of documentary people. It's cool. We have people like versed in like weird skills like submarine filming and things like that. But the work is not as frequent. And so it is, and we're constantly saying it's a little high here. So it was, the part of the budget was like, we want to make sure that people are compensated. And that was a hard part because we have to also get buildings and locations. And there was one point we were like trying to figure out, how do we buy snow? And feeding everyone is super, super important when you're there for like 12, 18-hour days. And it was really nice. And it speaks to kind of what Katrina was talking about how people were so excited and invested that we had a lot of people who were just like, I will volunteer and I will come help you with this. You don't need to like do compensation for that. And that was like incredibly sweet and really helpful to our budget and our budget challenges with that. And so like all those people, we are so thankful to have your talent and your skills and that you just shared it with us because you believe in the mission of this. It was just like, that was another part I think Voice Set was great because it was just an incredibly overwhelmingly positive and supportive environment. Like people who were there really wanted to be there.
Yeah, and as much as I would love to pay everybody like really the amount they deserve, really what made it possible on this budget was a lot of people working for lower rates than they're used to, and a lot of volunteers, all our background actors, all of our production assistants. Just that's really what made this possible with the limited amount of money that we had. And So yeah, being able to then spend that money on renting all the equipment that we needed and getting the locations and being able to feed everybody. That's basically how that worked out.
And I know that's not every set. Like I did a set once where it wasn't something that, it was not like a topic that where everyone was into. And so like we had to cut days and we had to change sort of the vision of it because we had to put our money into having our great crew, and it sort of changed the outcome of the film. So that was really great in this situation, is that we got to do basically Katrina's full vision for this project and have the equipment that our DP thought would tell the story in the visual way that would help like bring these ideas to life and help like execute the sort of new fun genre we're breaking down in this one and help build that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, I know that my brother, I think once or twice worked on a film set, I think just with helping out with some of the set builds for a couple days. I think back in a few years ago in Vancouver for, I think, one of the Hallmark Christmas movies or something, and just the amount of work that goes in and just how long the days are. You mentioned it being, 18-hour days are the norm in many cases. So I barely can struggle to get through a 12-hour day. So I can't even imagine working an 18-hour day on set.
Yeah, I personally did not want to have days that long, so I tried really hard to keep it to no longer than 12, which is still a long time. But yeah, I was my AD and I were both pushing to try to stay as on schedule as possible because didn't want anyone burning out or like getting sick before the weekend ended. Because also a lot of these long hours, especially that first day, we're outside at night, and it can just be physically exhausting being in the cold for so long. So I just wanted to try to make sure that we were trying to stay as on schedule as possible.
There's a whole other thing to go into about like ethical filmmaking, and 18-hour days are not it. It's unhealthy for people to be doing that and then go home from however long their set location is and sleep for like 40 minutes, maybe 2 hours while they wait to go home and then like come back. So, the budget and the time we have for our days were constrained, but I don't think we hit an above a 12-hour day of actually filming and working, which I'm super proud of, that we were able to do that and stick that and create that schedule that way.
That is so true. I didn't
Sure.
even think about the fact that if you're, working an 18-hour day, hey, you got to be back on the film set the next day for another 18-hour day, and just how little time that allows for you to rest and recover to go back the next day just to start it all over again. That's a really, really good point that you brought up.
Yep. So lots of things we're trying to balance there, and everybody's health and safety and well-being being one of them.
Absolutely. Super, super important. And welcome on in, David Murray Solomon. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad you were able to join us and to have somebody that was actually on set for the film as well. It's really exciting to have you with us here today.
Dave's also our executive producer, one of our big donors for the film. So
Heck yes. Thank you so
Good to
much
see you
for
here,
being
Dave.
here. So I think you've already alluded
Who's
to.
that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
Thank you, Duke.
It's Clefairy!
Fuck!
Thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to David Murray Solomon. Welcome on into the sub club. You now have ad-free viewing for the next 30 days and access to 7 emotes as well. Thank you so much for all your kindness again, Duke. I think you've already alluded to some of this already, but were there any really unexpected challenges that came up while filming? Because there's always those unexpected things that you just aren't prepared for.
yeah.
Go for it.
I mean, a lot of the challenges were kind of expected, trying to stay on schedule and everything. Let's see. So I listed a couple that were more unexpected. One that was resolved and everything pretty quickly was it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks before filming. I was happened to be having a games night over Zoom with Sean, our assistant director, and one of our friends, a couple of our friends from swing dancing, and one of them was talking about how, oh, she's glad that there are Lindy Hop level 2 classes on Sundays now over at Mobtown, and that works so much better for her schedule. And I was like, but surely not on January 26th, right? Surely not that Sunday, because we have the whole place booked that entire day for filming. So, but I was able to get that worked out with the owner of the place and have her tell them all that, oh yeah, your dance class is canceled that week. So it would have been awkward if we had a whole dance class come in while we were in the middle of filming.
Absolutely. That
yeah.
would have been a real struggle for sure.
but we got that worked out. The other unexpected struggle I had, or challenge I had listed here, was unfortunately my cat didn't deal with this very well. So one of our filming locations was at my apartment. And so like the Wednesday before filming, I had a cleaner come, and then the day before filming, the production designer came. So it was and then of course the first shoot day we started in my apartment. We have a whole film crew here, so it was a few stressful days in a row for my cats. And my cat, one of my cats just was not eating, and so trying to deal with that during the shoot weekend where my cat hadn't eaten in multiple days and being like, do I need to take her to a vet? My sister was supposed to help us out on our last shoot day up in Baltimore, and so I ended up like messaging her late the night before, asking her to instead go to my apartment and bring my cat to the emergency vet and try to get some fluids into her and see if they can do any blood work and make sure like she's okay. So thankfully my sister was able to take care of that, and so like I'm texting her between takes, like getting her information for the vet and answering questions and like checking to see if, like what the results of the blood work are and everything. So that was not a pleasant challenge, but thankfully my cat was okay and recovered from that, and my sister was able to handle the vet stuff. Had a pretty big vet bill after that, but we're all good now. So that was one unexpected challenge.
Pet budget was not a part of that one.
That was not something we budgeted for.
And I was going to say, part of like producing is like trying to imagine every timeline and every problem. And I did not think about Kat having a social breakdown. And I'm sorry, I didn't even know that till right now because we're also crazy doing different things on set. But yeah, sorry. The ones I can think of was the snow. I was particularly stressed out about the snow because we can't really it's a snowstorm in Iceland if we don't have any snow to kind of go off of. So I'm in my storage unit, like looking around for like my snow blanket that I've used for my business and trying to find other things. I have like shovels. And then the 2 days before there's like a final location scout. It's like, oh my gosh, all the snow, thank goodness. And then I get to set a little bit earlier than other people. The first day of filming, like, this is not snow right now. So yeah, as I referenced earlier, our lovely production assistants, we coordinated them to just kind of scoop from the field and we put it in a car and then we drove the car over and then they shoveled it out and we had snow ground for the takes we needed it. And it was great and they are amazing. But I think that was the biggest one. The other one was having to coordinate prop food and the making sure that we had the food we needed to, but the last day where we had to see the food, we didn't have as many production assistants, so I'm the one out being like, all right, closest grocery store I can walk to because people still need to talk to and answer me questions, and going into a kind of scary sort of parallel dimension grocery store where there's no baked goods.
Oh, interesting.
It was, yeah, I don't think Katrina heard this one, is going into like this sort of like haunted house of a grocery store, and it's like all packaged things. It's kind of like a micro Costco, and being like, do you have any baked goods? And this lady's like, we got these sale things you probably shouldn't eat. They've been here for a while. And this corner was like, no one's eating them. Great.
We don't need to eat them.
We don't need to eat them. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the only unexpected. Everything else sort of had, at least in my head, a contingency for what could go wrong. So yeah, we didn't hit any of them.
I'm so sorry about the unexpected vet bill. I can't even imagine how stressful that must have all been for your cat. And to not have the cat eating for a few days, all while trying to get this filmed, must have been, oh, I can't even imagine the stress that was.
Yeah, not ideal, but I'm very thankful that my sister was able to to come in and help take care of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're coming towards the end here of the questions that I had prepared. Before we show the little trailer, is there anything else you wanted to mention about the film, about, you know, anything related to Aerospec Awareness Week?
I believe you also had the question of an expected release date and where we
Oh,
can
yeah.
watch the film. So, don't have a specific release date, but the goal is to have the premiere sometime in June for Pride Month. And it will be on YouTube. I don't know exactly the order of whether we'll have like an in-person premiere before YouTube or if we'll do like festivals first, but at some point it will definitely be on our YouTube channel, because that was my goal the entire time, was to make sure it ended up on YouTube so that people all across the world could access it and watch it for free. So yeah, so you can keep an eye on our
Who's that
Instagram
Pokemon?
account.
It's Pikachu!
It's Clefairy!
Yeah, probably Instagram's kind of where it's easiest to get updates. You can also, if you want email updates, you can follow our Seed and Spark page, but that requires like giving your information to Seed and Spark. But yeah, so we'll keep people updated on when the release date is, and if we're having any premieres like in person or viewings or festival runs. But yes, that's my goal, is to have it viewed somewhere at some point during Pride Month this year.
I mean, that's the perfect timing for, you know, this film for sure. Have it out in June, just in time for Pride Month. You know, what better time could you pick other than, I guess, pick, say, like, you know, International Asexuality Day, but otherwise Pride Month is like peak time for the film for sure. So very excited. I can't wait for it to come out. And you said it'll be on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. And
That's
we
awesome.
are Aromcom Film on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook as well.
Fantastic. And I have pinned up in the chat here the Aromcom film link tree, which has all the links to and is the Facebook on there as well? Yeah, so I think everything
all
about
our socials are on there.
all the socials are listed in the link tree.
Who's that
Duke
Pokemon?
going
It's
ham,
Pikachu!
giving
It's Clefairy!
gift subs to Chris Hangry and to Ken Drama 94. Thank you so much, Duke. You've been far, far, far too kind again, as usual. And do you want to show the trailer that you created for Seed Spark? Do you want me to pull that up and show it?
Sure, yeah, and just a little context, yeah. So this was the pitch video that we had for our fundraising campaign. So the end of it talks about trying to raise funds and everything, and of course at this point we have already shot it. There's a link in our link tree to our fiscal sponsor page where you can still contribute money if you want to help with post-production funds, but obviously the bulk of our film has already been funded. But yes, so this video was what we made several months back for our crowdfunding campaign.
Help Katrina pay for her vet bill. That's the line right.
So I'm going to the Aromcom crowdfunding pitch. Is that the one I want to look for? Which one's the best one to show?
So there's probably two on there. So the most recent one, the second crowdfunding, because we had a video for our first crowdfunding campaign, and then did a new one for our second crowdfunding campaign.
So let me grab the return of the
the return of the crowdfunding.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me pull that up here. Just one sec, folks. I got to get through an ad here.
I saw Chris Angry said Caddis co-director needs health insurance. We don't get health insurance in film unless you're part of the union.
No.
So the Caddis is in the same boat as the rest of us.
Right.
All right, so let me pull up the YouTube here. So just give me a sec. I'm going to do a window capture. Source.
Free kitty health insurance or riot.
All right, so they can't see us at the moment. They've got the YouTube here. Can you check to make sure this is the correct one?
Yep, that's the right one.
Perfect. So I'm going to turn up the volume. Let me know if you can hear it, folks.
Adam's in love with you.
No, we're just friends.
He's not into me.
I had a crush on you.
No, you didn't.
I do not like Amy.
Literally just another silly crush.
It's not a crush.
What if there were characters who, when they denied they have romantic feelings toward each other, they actually meant it?
I think she has a crush.
I do not. I just think you're ridiculously cool and like awesome, and that we should totally be friends.
Aromcom is an upcoming short film where a new friendship is just as exciting as a new romance. This cozy platonic meet-cute takes place during a winter storm in Iceland, where a nosy woman develops a squish, a platonic crush, on the badass, aloof owner of a found GoPro, who starts to open up once they discover that they're both on the aromantic and asexual spectrums.
How did you know it was my GoPro? Because little Miss Nancy Drew over here is nosy as fuck.
I wrote a rom-com because the asexual and aromantic spectrums are among the least represented queer identities, and for those who don't experience attraction in the typical manner, they may feel a sense of grief over not getting to experience the type of life that society taught them they should want to have. So I wanted to create a happy, wish fulfillment story about human connection without the romance. And I know a lot of people want to see stories like this. The UCLA released a report last October stating that half of the adolescents they surveyed in the US want to see more platonic relationships depicted on screen, and 39% want to see more aromantic and asexual characters.
Most of my friends are couples. They only travel with their romantic partners.
I've been in the storytelling business for over a decade. A lot of my experience has been in science storytelling, particularly space science, as you might be able to tell from the posters behind me. I used to be the lead video producer for the Hubble Space Telescope, and I created a whole YouTube documentary about queer experiences in astronomy that aired on Democracy Now! I've done a lot of community theater, including directing, producing, choreographing, and performing in a variety of musicals and plays. Plus, I was an editor on multiple short films. So I'm really excited to bring together all these skills to direct my first narrative film. We plan to film a rom-com this upcoming January in the Washington, D.C. area, and we have the most wonderful team to bring this story to life. Our award-winning producer, Catherine, is passionate about asexual and queer stories, and our incredibly creative cinematographer, Maddie, is a wizard at using visual language to reimagine structures of visibility and power. You should definitely go read their full bios on Seed and Spark and learn about the rest of our amazing team members.
Oh, thanks. That means a lot coming from, like, the coolest person on the planet.
So now's the part where you come in. We're gonna need money to do all this. We're gonna need to pay for our locations, our craft services, our props and set pieces, insurance, plus we wanna pay our fantastic cast and crew. You can help us do that by, of course, making a pledge to our Seed and Spark campaign, and we have some fun incentives at a variety of tier levels. A rom-com has a non-profit fiscal sponsor from their Heart Productions, which means that you would actually be making a tax-deductible charitable donation. Just as important as the money is sharing the campaign and helping us get the word out to all the people who are interested in seeing queer and airways films get made. You can follow us on social media at Aromcom Film, and thank you, truly thank you so much for all your support in creating more representation for queer and Aspec stories.
Awesome. So it's already the Seed and Spark crowdfunding has already taken place, so that part's not relevant at this time. Is there you're still accepting donations though for the film, right?
Yeah, there's a different page through our fiscal sponsor where you can make a donation if you would like to do that, and that's available through our link tree. And it's if you're in the U.S., it's tax deductible if you make enough donations to deduct that off of your taxes.
Yes, for the help pay Katrina's vet bill fund.
Right. Well, we're for post production. I'm waiting to hear back if I applied for another grant that I won't hear back from until sometime in March. And so if we get more money for post production, the first thing that fund would be going towards is a composer to get custom music for the film. So that would be kind of our top priority. And then depending how much funds there are, might also be able to pay for like a sound designer and a colorist. If we don't have the funds, then I'm just going to be doing that myself, and I'll be searching for stock music that we can use for like a limited amount of money. So I'm doing the editing myself. So and I can do like a certain level of color correction and color grading and sound design, but if we end up getting more money, I can hire somebody who is like a specialist at that.
It's nice to get people who are super talented in their specific niche because it just brings like a other layer to it. But Katrina's so talented. It's gonna go great either way. I think the other nice part about like you were talking about music is that I don't know if you've ever watched like Jurassic Park and if you could imagine a stock sound behind it, but music cues, which you get with a composer, are like game changer. If you can pause and change the music based on the emotional beats, it's everything. So yes, that would be nice as well.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to get a composer. There have been multiple people reaching out already. Like ever since our first crowdfunding campaign, there have been several people reaching out interested in composing, and like, well, that's a long ways down the road, and we'll see what money we have. But we're almost at that point now, so we'll see what money we have. I can't hear you at the moment, but I don't know if that's just.
Oh, my apologies.
me.
I was muted.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay.
Oh, I was saying it would be so incredibly cool that if you're able to get that funded, to have that music composition piece, for sure. So if anybody does want to donate, the link is up there in the link tree.
Yes.
Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out with me on this first return of the podcast since October. It's been so amazing to chat with both of you about Aromcom, about Aerospec Awareness Week, and about the experiences that many of us in the ACE and Aero community, across the board experience with regards to frustration around a lack of appreciation in society for platonic relationships, a lack of understanding of, what actually does, Ace and Arrow mean. So it's been a lot of fun chatting about all these things with you today. And I learned a lot about the film. I'd only seen little bits and pieces. I hadn't actually found the link tree before today. I'd only seen your Seed and Spark before, so thank you for sharing the correct one with me.
Sure.
It was a lot of fun chatting. Thank you so much again. And I think with that, that's kind of the end of the discussion that I had prepared for today. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I think thank you for having us. We
Of
really
course.
love to talk about our film. I hadn't talked about it in a month, as I had mentioned earlier, like on a slightly mental break, but it just reminded me of how excited I am that this film gets to like exist and be out there and that there's an audience ready and excited to see it.
Absolutely. I know that I am super excited for it. I cannot wait for it to come out in June. I will be clicking on the link right away as soon as it comes out to watch it for sure. And I know that a lot of the people in the podcast group here are also excited to see it. So I'm very excited for its release in June. So at this point, usually what we do is we go on a raid and raid somebody in Twitch. That's kind of what people do at the end of stream. And so we'll do the hashtag Aspec podcast raid. And we'll also say with Arom crew.